My sister stole my fiancé 4 days before our wedding, so I let them marry, then exposed their secret plot in front of 220 guests. My sister stole my fiancé just 4 days before our wedding, and when she did, I made sure she received a wedding gift she'd remember for the rest of her life. Looking back now, the warning signs had been there all along. Sophie had always been the favorite in our family, prettier, smarter, more charming somehow. Ever since we were kids, she had a habit of taking whatever mattered to me. First it was my clothes, then my friends, then the guys I cared about. When I was 17, I had the biggest crush on Kevin Alvarez, but Sophie convinced him to take her to prom instead, lying that I'd been interested in someone else. Years later, when I was studying abroad in Spain, she moved into the apartment with my college boyfriend, Nathan, claiming she was only helping him cope after his father's death. Somehow everyone believed her. Every time something like that happened, my parents rushed to defend her. My mom would hold me and say, "Sophie never means to hurt you. She just has this personality that pulls people in." My dad's version, "She's young and she doesn't always think before she acts." The problem was, Sophie always thought before she acted. I found that out at 16 when I accidentally read her diary, packed with carefully planned ways to take things that belonged to me. About Kevin, "Emily's so boring. I bet I can make him notice me after one conversation." About Nathan, "He's way too good for Emily. She doesn't even realize what she has." Even after everything she'd done, I truly believed Ryan Bennett would be different. We'd spent 5 years together and had been engaged for the last 9 months. We first met while I was working as a waitress to pay my way through nursing school, and Ryan was sweating through long shifts as a line cook, dreaming about owning a restaurant someday, even though his paycheck barely covered his bills. We built our relationship during those exhausting late nights when he'd burn another sauce experimenting with recipes, and I'd stand beside him at 2 in the morning, scraping blackened pans while making him laugh instead of letting him get discouraged. I believed in his dream more than anyone else did. When every bank turned him down for a business loan, I handed over every dollar I'd saved, $27,500, to help him start building his restaurant. His own family thought he'd ruined his future by dropping out of college to attend culinary school, but I never stopped believing he would prove them wrong. Ryan knew exactly what Sophie was capable of because he'd witnessed it himself. He'd sat through family dinners while she openly flirted with my old high school boyfriend, Brian, right in front of me, and when I confronted her, she insisted she'd only been friendly. During my wedding dress appointments, she made one cutting remark after another. "Don't you think something tighter would be better? Ryan should be excited when he sees you." At our Christmas party the year before, she somehow spilled red wine all over our engagement photos, then blamed the lighting and generously offered her photographer friend to take new pictures. After that party, Ryan shook his head and told me, "Your sister is exhausting." Like I always did, I defended her. The night of our rehearsal dinner couldn't have gone any better. We reserved the private dining room at Trattoria Marchetti, where Ryan and I had our first real date. Around 60 friends and relatives filled the room with laughter and champagne toasts. During my dad's speech, Ryan quietly squeezed my hand while my father talked about how proud he was to welcome Ryan into our family. Sitting across from us was Sophie, glowing in the sapphire bridesmaid dress I'd paid $450 for. The seat she'd insisted was best for pictures. All through dinner, she leaned toward Ryan whenever he spoke, laughing louder than anyone else at his jokes. When I quietly pointed it out, Ryan whispered, "She's just excited for us." Sophie's always been a little dramatic. When it was time for the maid of honor speech, Sophie walked up with tears glistening in her eyes, her voice cracking with what sounded like real emotion. "Emily has always been the person I've looked up to. Ryan, you're marrying a woman who will fight for your dreams. Emily, you're marrying a man who truly sees how amazing you are." She lifted her glass. "Here's to Emily and Ryan. May you always choose each other above everything else." The room filled with applause. Ryan kissed my cheek and whispered, "Your sister really loves you." I felt ashamed for ever doubting her. 2 nights later, I lay awake, telling myself it was nothing more than normal pre-wedding nerves. I'd already laid out my grandmother's vintage 1958 wedding gown, confirmed the guest count with the caterer, 165 people, and checked that the rings were safe with the best man. By 5:30, I gave up on sleep and decided to surprise Ryan with breakfast so we could spend our last morning together before becoming husband and wife. I stopped for his favorite dark roast coffee and a bag of bagels, then used my key to let myself into his apartment above Mrs. Delgado's flower shop, just like I had hundreds of times before. The moment I stepped inside, my entire world came crashing down. There they were, together in his bed. My sister was lying beside my fiancé, and the white silk lingerie I'd bought for our honeymoon was tossed carelessly on the floor. On the nightstand sat my engagement ring, beside empty champagne glasses and takeout containers from Vanello's, the restaurant where we'd celebrated our 7-month anniversary. Sophie noticed me before Ryan did. Instead of looking embarrassed, she stared at me with complete satisfaction, sitting up without making any effort to cover herself. "I was going to tell you," she said calmly. Ryan panicked, scrambling to pull on his boxers while stumbling over apologies, insisting it had just happened, that he was confused, that he still loved me. This isn't what it looks like," he muttered, the most predictable excuse imaginable. Before he could say anything else, Sophie burst into a laugh that sent a chill through me. I recognized it instantly. The exact laugh she'd used at 13 after convincing our parents I'd broken Mom's antique vase. The laugh she made whenever she believed she'd won. "Ryan, stop pretending you're sorry," she said with a grin. "We've been planning this for months." Then, turning to me without the slightest hint of regret, "Go ahead and tell her about the hotel room in Vegas during that restaurant conference. Tell her about Christmas when you whispered my name while you were asleep. Or maybe tell her what you admitted last week, that you wished you'd met me before you ever met her." My legs nearly gave out. The Vegas conference had happened 8 months earlier. Christmas had been at my parents' house with Sophie in the guest room right beside ours. And last week was when Ryan had suddenly gone distant, blaming stress from work while I believed every word. "Go ahead and tell her about the loan," Sophie continued, sounding more confident with every word. "Tell her how the two of us are planning to use all of her savings to open a restaurant together instead." My head started spinning. $27,500, every cent from endless 60-hour work weeks, holiday shifts, and skipped meals, was supposed to build Bennett's Place, the restaurant we'd planned together. "Sophie, that's enough," Ryan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, but she ignored him completely. "Why don't you tell her about the apartment we toured last week? The one with the huge kitchen and the beautiful garden view? Or maybe tell her how we've been planning to leave right after the wedding, take her money, and start over together in Denver." Hearing the name Denver hit like another punch. Only weeks earlier, Ryan had mentioned that a chef friend had offered him a position there, and I'd encouraged him to consider it. While I'd spent months choosing flowers, tasting cakes, and confirming RSVPs, the two of them had been planning the biggest betrayal of my life. Every late night, Ryan claimed he was stuck at the restaurant. Every time he'd come home smelling like perfume and blamed a waitress. Every shopping trip Sophie had mysteriously canceled. It all suddenly fit into place. Even the way they'd volunteered to handle the photographer and videographer, claiming they had connections who could save us money, had been part of the plan. I could still hear Sophie proudly saying, "We picked Brooke Sullivan. She's amazing at capturing candid moments. She won't miss a single memory." Now I finally understood why that mattered so much to her. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out, both of them shouting my name behind me. For the next 7 hours, I stayed parked at Crescent Bay, the exact place where Ryan had proposed to me 14 months earlier with a sunset picnic and a playlist of our songs. By all rights, I should have been crying, canceling the wedding. Instead, something inside me changed. The sadness faded, replaced by something cold, steady, and clear. Sophie had spent our entire lives taking whatever she wanted from me, and every time I'd forgiven her, because family was supposed to forgive. But this wasn't a borrowed sweater or a boyfriend stolen for fun. This time she'd gone after my future, my savings, and the life I'd spent years building. Around 11:30, I drove back to my parents' house and found them scrambling to cancel wedding arrangements. The moment Mom saw me, mascara streaked down her face, she hurried over. "Sweetheart," Ryan called. "He says it was all just confusion, cold feet. Maybe if the two of you just talk, you can work everything out." Even after everything I'd seen, they were still giving him the benefit of the doubt. "There's nothing confusing about this," I said, setting my purse on the counter. "The wedding is still happening tomorrow. It's just not going to unfold the way anyone thinks it will." My dad suggested I was in shock. "I'm not in shock," I replied. "I think this is the clearest I've thought in months. And I'm serious, the wedding is still on." After that, I walked upstairs, locked myself in my childhood bedroom, and got to work. The first person I called was my cousin Marcus, who worked in tech security for a company protecting celebrities from stalkers, hackers, and corporate espionage. Marcus had always been my favorite cousin, 4 years older, incredibly intelligent, and one of the very few people who'd never fallen for Sophie's games. "Marcus, I need a favor," I said. "Remember when you told me I could ask for anything after I helped you through your divorce?" His ex-wife had tried to strip him of everything, even his dog and his grandmother's wedding ring during the settlement. I'd spent 4 months helping him document her hidden assets, and in the end, he'd kept everything that mattered, including full custody of his dog. Without hesitating, Marcus answered, "Just tell me what you need." I explained everything, the affair, the stolen money, the plan Ryan and Sophie had secretly put together behind my back. He didn't interrupt once, only muttering a disgusted curse now and then. "Those 2 pieces of garbage," he said when I finished. So what's the plan? What do you need from me? Marcus had spent years designing security systems for celebrity weddings and helping friends collect evidence when they suspected cheating spouses. If anyone understood how to quietly uncover the truth, it was him. I need to know everything, I told him. How long they've been together, exactly what they've been planning, and proof that's impossible for either of them to deny. Send me Ryan's address and phone number, Marcus replied. I can have tiny cameras inside his apartment within 3 hours. If I get my hands on his phone for about 45 seconds, I can clone everything on it. How deep do you want me to go? As deep as we legally can, I answered. If this ever ends up in court, every piece of evidence has to hold up. He figured he'd pose as a cable technician, since half the buildings in that neighborhood had already reported internet problems that week, so nobody would question it. After hanging up with Marcus, I made one more call to Brooke Sullivan, the wedding photographer Sophie had insisted we hire, known for capturing genuine, unposed moments instead of stiff pictures. The moment she answered, I introduced myself. She sounded instantly cheerful. Emily, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for tomorrow. Sophie has told me so much about you. That caught my attention, so Sophie had already been talking about me behind my back. Actually, I said, I'm calling because there have been a few changes. Tomorrow, I need you to follow a very specific shot list, and I want to make sure you're comfortable photographing some moments that might be a little unconventional. Brooke didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I built my reputation on capturing the moments other photographers miss. What exactly are you looking for? I took a slow breath. I need you to document absolutely everything that happens tomorrow. If something feels awkward, inappropriate, or uncomfortable, I especially want you to capture it. Can you do that? She paused. That's actually interesting. Sophie mentioned you might want something dramatic, that you loved authentic storytelling. I'm completely on board. Should I bring extra memory cards? That told me everything I needed to know. Sophie had been planning this long before I ever found out about the affair, even preparing her own photographer friend to record what she expected would be my public humiliation. Perfect, I replied. Bring every memory card you've got, and there may be a live video element tomorrow. Are you comfortable with live streaming? She was, and I asked her to keep our conversation between us. Don't worry, she laughed. Your secret's safe with me. Sophie always told me you were far more creative than people realized. After I ended the call, I sat there for several minutes. Sophie hadn't just planned to steal my fiancé. She'd spent months arranging for someone to professionally document my breakdown at the altar. Then I picked up my phone and made the hardest call of the day. Ryan's mother answered before the second ring finished. Diane Bennett had never trusted Sophie ever since our engagement party, when she'd caught her flirting shamelessly with Ryan's married older brother while his wife had stepped away. Mrs. Bennett was an old-school Baptist woman with firm beliefs about marriage, loyalty, and women who chased men who were already taken. The second she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. Sweetheart, what happened? You sound heartbroken. I told her everything. Finding Ryan and Sophie together that morning, the affair going on for months, the plan to humiliate me at my own wedding before taking my savings to start a new life in Denver. When I finished, there was nothing but silence. Then her breathing, short and uneven, as though she was struggling to keep herself under control. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling with anger. Those sinful children. After everything you've done for my son, after you stood beside him through culinary school, after his own father spent years telling him he'd never amount to anything. Ryan's father had always been hard on him, forever comparing him to his successful older brother. And more times than I could count, I'd spent the drive home trying to rebuild Ryan's confidence after another one of those dinners. Mrs. Bennett, I have a plan, I said, but I can't pull it off without your help. She didn't hesitate. Just tell me what you need, sweetheart. That boy has been making bad choices his whole life, and Sophie is exactly the kind of woman who will lead him straight into disaster. I explained every step of my plan, and she listened without interrupting, only letting out an occasional approving hum. When I finished, she asked one question. Are you sure every bit of this is legal? Marcus is taking care of all the technical details, I assured her. I'm simply allowing the truth to reveal itself at my own wedding. She let out a satisfied breath. Good. Ryan has spent too many years thinking he could avoid consequences, and Sophie clearly believes people will always step aside and let her take whatever she wants. There's one last thing, I said. I have to know Ryan will actually show up tomorrow. Mrs. Bennett answered without the slightest doubt. Oh, he'll be there. I'll personally make sure of it. He owes you the decency of facing everyone who came to celebrate your relationship. The morning of what was supposed to be my wedding started at 6:30 a.m., and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. My phone had already exploded with notifications. Bridesmaids checking the schedule, vendors confirming arrival times, relatives asking for directions to the church. At 6:20, a text from Sophie popped up. Ryan told me everything. I'm so sorry, sis. Can we please talk before the ceremony? I need to explain. Even now, she was still trying to manipulate me, probably hoping I'd quietly call off the wedding and disappear so she could ride off with Ryan and my money. I typed back only, "Of course, I'll see you at the church." She had no idea I'd spent the entire night making sure every detail was ready. At 3:15 a.m., Marcus had sent a short message. "Package delivered, everything's installed, and you're going to enjoy the bonus footage." That meant he'd uncovered even more than we'd expected. My hair and makeup team arrived exactly as scheduled. I hadn't canceled a single appointment, just told everyone there'd been a few unexpected changes. My makeup artist Nina smiled at me through the mirror. "You're surprisingly relaxed. Most brides are crying, panicking, or yelling by this point." I smiled back. "I'm exactly where I need to be." And for the first time in a long while, I truly meant it. By 10:30, I stepped into St. Augustine's Catholic Church wearing my wedding dress. Guests were already filling the parking lot. More than 220 people had taken vacation days, bought gifts, reserved hotel rooms, and traveled from as far as California because they believed they were about to witness the happiest day of my life. Inside the bridal suite, Sophie was waiting in the sapphire bridesmaid dress, and for what felt like the first time in her life, she actually looked nervous, adjusting her hair, fidgeting with her dress. The moment I walked in, she sprang to her feet like someone caught red-handed. "Emily, please, I need to explain everything." I calmly stepped closer and fixed a loose strand of her hair. "There's nothing you need to explain," I said with a soft smile. "You wanted Ryan. Well, you can have him." Relief instantly spread across her face, followed by the unmistakable look of victory she'd worn so many times before. The same expression she'd had years earlier when she convinced our parents to give her my bedroom after I left for college. "Wait, really? You're not angry?" "Why would I be? You're my sister. If you honestly believe Ryan is your soulmate, who am I to stand in the way of true love?" She practically lit up, in her mind winning again without paying any price, still believing I was the same quiet sister who always stepped aside. She wrapped her arms around me carefully, not to ruin either of our makeup. "You're handling this so well. Honestly, I thought you'd make a huge scene." I laughed softly. "Me? 'Cause a scene? When have I ever done something like that?" "Never. You've always been the reasonable one. That's why Ryan and I figured you'd understand eventually." I nodded as though I agreed, and while helping her touch up her lipstick, said casually, "There is one small change to today's ceremony, though." She looked at me curiously. "What kind of change?" I met her eyes in the mirror. "Since you and Ryan are so deeply in love, I decided you should be the one walking down the aisle today." Her smile disappeared instantly. "What are you talking about?" "I've arranged for you to marry Ryan instead," I replied calmly. "Right here, today, in front of everyone." Every bit of color drained from her face. "Emily, we can't just do that." I simply smiled. "Why not? You love him, he loves you, every guest is already here, the flowers have been paid for, the cake is waiting, the photographer is ready, and your special moment is going to be documented in a way neither of you will ever forget." I could practically see the gears turning in Sophie's head. This wasn't how she'd imagined taking my fiancé. Her plan had always been to do it quietly, gradually, making herself look like the innocent woman who'd accidentally fallen in love rather than the sister who deliberately destroyed someone else's relationship. "But what are you going to tell everyone?" she asked, her voice suddenly much weaker. "The truth," I answered without hesitation. "That my sister and my fiancé discovered they were soulmates, that I'm stepping aside so true love can win, and everyone here gets to witness the beginning of your wonderful future together." Her face told me she realized she was trapped. Refuse, and everyone would immediately see her for what she was. Agree, and she'd be marrying Ryan before she'd had time to think about what came afterward. Barely above a whisper, she finally asked, "Where's Ryan?" "He's getting ready in the groom's suite," I said. "He's so excited to marry you, Sophie." Of course, none of that was true. Ever since sunrise, Ryan had been desperately trying to reach me, flooding my phone with texts, begging for one chance to explain. Between 6 and 8 that morning alone, he'd called me 21 times before I finally blocked his number. Every message after that, I simply forwarded to Sophie with one short note. "Your groom seems a little nervous. Maybe you should go comfort him." About 25 minutes later, Sophie stood at the back of St. Augustine's wearing a wedding dress borrowed from our cousin Natalie, who happened to wear the same size and had brought her own dress along for family photos. The alterations had been rushed, but from a distance no one could tell. As guests noticed the unexpected change, confused whispers spread through the church. Pastor Harrison stepped up to the microphone and carefully read the announcement I'd prepared. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, today we will be celebrating the marriage of Ryan Bennett and Sophie Richardson instead of Emily Richardson and Ryan Bennett. The murmurs grew louder. I remained seated in the front row beside my parents, who looked completely stunned, answering my father's whispered questions with nothing more than a peaceful smile and vague comments about true love finding its own path. Sophie made her way down the aisle, forcing a smile that looked more painful than joyful. At the altar, Ryan looked like he was about to throw up, kept glancing at me, silently begging me to stop everything. The organ played "Here Comes the Bride," as more than 200 guests watched what had to be the strangest wedding ceremony any of them had ever attended. Brooke moved around the sanctuary exactly as I'd hoped, capturing every forced smile on Sophie's face, every terrified glance from Ryan, every confused reaction from our families. When Pastor Harrison asked whether anyone objected, the entire church fell silent, every pair of eyes turning toward me. The silence seemed to last forever. Then I smiled warmly and gave him a small nod to continue. "Ryan, do you take Sophie to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Ryan looked at me one last time, eyes filled with desperation. I returned the same calm expression I'd worn all morning. His mother was staring him down from the second row, more than 200 guests waiting for his answer, Sophie gripping his hands so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Finally, his voice barely escaped his throat. "I do." Pastor Harrison turned to Sophie and asked the same question. She paused for only a second, as if realizing the words "for richer" or "poorer" might carry far more weight than she'd expected, then lifted her chin and confidently answered, "I do. You may kiss the bride." Their kiss was quick, stiff, and painfully awkward. Nothing more than a brief peck between two people who suddenly realized they were standing in the middle of a disaster. During cocktail hour, I played my role perfectly, smiling, greeting guests, moving from one conversation to the next like the supportive, gracious sister everyone expected. Whenever someone asked what had happened, I calmly explained that love had simply taken an unexpected turn, that Ryan and Sophie had discovered they were meant for each other. Mrs. Delgado, the sweet older woman who owned the flower shop beneath Ryan's apartment, gently squeezed my hand. "You're handling this better than anyone could. Most women would be completely heartbroken." I gave her a peaceful smile. Ryan and Sophie belong together. Sometimes it takes something dramatic before the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Ryan's old college friends exchanged confused looks but decided not to question it. Sophie's sorority sisters seemed almost entertained, acting as though the entire situation was some unbelievable romantic twist. Meanwhile, at the head table, I watched the excitement slowly drain from Ryan and Sophie's faces as the reality settled in. They were now legally married, without a prenuptial agreement, in front of every important person in their lives. Ryan couldn't stop glancing at his phone, searching for some miracle escape that didn't exist. Sophie kept wearing her polished, confident smile, but behind it, I could see panic creeping into her eyes. Dinner was exactly the reception I'd spent months planning for my own wedding. Salmon with lemon caper sauce, roasted vegetables, wild rice pilaf, and the elegant 3-tier vanilla and raspberry cake I'd designed with the baker. Even the floral arrangements remained exactly as I'd envisioned. White roses mixed with baby's breath because they reminded me of my grandmother's garden. Every single detail was perfect, just not for the bride I'd originally planned. Once dinner was nearly over, I slowly stood and tapped my champagne glass with a silver knife. The clear ringing sound echoed across the ballroom. Before we cut the cake, I'd like to give the happy couple a very special wedding gift. Conversation stopped instantly as every guest turned toward me. Ryan and Sophie exchanged puzzled looks, obviously expecting an emotional speech about acceptance or sacrificing my own happiness so true love could win. Instead, I smiled even wider. As most of you already know, Ryan and Sophie's love story didn't begin today. It's actually been growing for quite some time, and I thought everyone deserved the chance to experience that journey right alongside them. The lights dimmed, and the projection screen we'd rented for our wedding slideshow slowly lowered from the ceiling, originally meant to display childhood memories and engagement photos. Instead, Marcus sat quietly at a table in the corner with his laptop open, ready for a very different presentation. "Brooke has done an incredible job documenting today's celebration," I said, "but I'd also like to share some earlier footage that truly captures how deep Ryan and Sophie's relationship really is." The first video showed Ryan and Sophie together inside his apartment months before I'd ever discovered the affair, recorded 4 months earlier by Marcus's hidden cameras, in sharp, crystal clear detail. On screen, the two of them laughed together about how completely unaware I was. Sophie smiled confidently. "Emily has always been so trusting. She still has no clue we've been planning all of this since March." An eerie silence filled the ballroom. 200 guests stared at the screen without a word. Another clip began. Ryan asked, Remind me again? How much money has she saved? Sophie answered without hesitation. $27,500. Once we're married and we've moved to Denver, she won't be able to get it back. It'll be enough to open the restaurant and disappear before she even knows what happened. Clip after clip followed. Ryan rehearsing the speech he intended to use when breaking up with me after the wedding. Sophie laughing while trying on my wedding dress inside his apartment. The two of them calculating how much they'd save by using every vendor I'd already paid for. Ryan talking confidently about convincing me to sign paperwork that would give him complete control over the restaurant business. Then came the most devastating clip, recorded just a week earlier. Sophie on the phone, laughing. Emily has always been pathetic. She'll probably beg Ryan to come back after the wedding, but by then we'll already be gone. She's far too spineless to ever fight back. The room remained frozen in complete silence as every lie, every betrayal unfolded on the screen in painful detail. Halfway through, Ryan's mother slowly stood, her face filled with disappointment and disgust, and quietly walked out of the ballroom. My parents sat completely motionless. Several of Sophie's sorority sisters had already pulled out their phones, recording everything as the truth unfolded before every guest. When the final video faded, I slowly stood, picked up the microphone, and looked around the silent room with the same calm smile I'd worn all day. "Surprise," I said cheerfully. I figured everyone deserved to know the real love story we came here to celebrate. Or for a brief second, nobody moved. Then the ballroom exploded into chaos. Guests pushing back their chairs, some storming toward the exits, others throwing napkins onto the tables in disgust. Ryan's groomsmen looked ready to drag him outside themselves. But I still wasn't finished. "I actually have one more wedding gift for the happy couple," I announced over the noise. Marcus stood and gave me a small nod, and a second later, phones all around the reception hall began vibrating at exactly the same time. Every guest had received a link to a private website with a complete collection of videos, along with screenshots of months of texts between Ryan and Sophie discussing their affair, planning my humiliation, and talking about taking my savings. "That way, everyone can remember this unforgettable day," I said sweetly. "The website includes everything Marcus collected during the past week, including some very interesting conversations about disappearing to Denver with my $27,500. Oh, and Sophie, you might want to check your social media. I already tagged everyone we know." Sophie grabbed her phone, stared at the screen for only a second, and let out a horrified scream. The videos were already spreading across Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok faster than she could open the notifications. Marcus had anticipated that, uploading the files to multiple platforms at once, so deleting one copy wouldn't make any difference. For anyone wondering, I added, the hashtag is #OurSisterlyLove. Feel free to join the conversation. Ryan's face had turned bright red with embarrassment and anger. "Emily, you've completely lost your mind. We'll just get this marriage annulled." I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder of legal paperwork. "Actually, that's not nearly as simple as you think. You're both adults, you willingly exchanged vows in front of more than 200 witnesses, and under state law, consummating the marriage isn't required for it to be legally valid. Marcus and I spent plenty of time researching everything, so congratulations. You two are officially married." Sophie shot to her feet and pointed at the screen where one of the videos had paused. "This is revenge porn. I'm going to sue you." Marcus calmly stood and addressed the room, like he was giving a professional presentation. "Everything shown today was obtained legally," he explained. Ryan had already signed agreements allowing security monitoring, and all recordings were reviewed for legal compliance before today's event. The ceremony itself was a public event where photography and videography were already authorized. He lifted a stack of documents. Every step was documented, and I have the paperwork supporting the process. Ryan grabbed Sophie's arm so tightly his knuckles turned white. "We're leaving," he snapped. I couldn't help smiling. "Probably a good idea. By the way, your honeymoon suite at the Regency has already been paid for. Unfortunately, it's completely non-refundable. The penthouse package, champagne, rose petals, the whole experience. I figured the two of you should enjoy every minute of it." They hurried toward the back of the reception hall, slipping through the kitchen entrance to avoid the furious guests gathering near the main doors. As they disappeared, I could still hear them screaming at each other. Sophie blaming Ryan for destroying everything, Ryan shouting back that stealing my money had been her idea from the beginning, their voices fading into the parking lot and leaving behind a silent ballroom filled with stunned guests and a 3-tier wedding cake no one would ever bother cutting. Cleaning up the reception took nearly 3 hours. Guests drifted out a few at a time, many stopping to apologize for not realizing what had really been happening. Tyler, the roommate Ryan had lived with during culinary school, shook his head with regret. "We should have said something. Ryan kept canceling plans, disappearing without explanations, and lying about where he was going. We figured he was just overwhelmed because of the wedding. The last person to leave was Mrs. Bennett, who wrapped me in a long hug, tears shining in her eyes. "I've never been prouder of you," she whispered. "Ryan got exactly what he got." And as for Sophie, she'll eventually realize the kind of man she fought so hard to marry. Ryan has always been weak. Whenever life gets difficult, he looks for someone else to blame, or somewhere else to run. Sophie thinks she won the grand prize, but sooner or later she'll understand she's married to a coward who'll make every problem her responsibility. The following morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. There was no crushing anxiety sitting on my chest anymore. My phone was overflowing with messages, but instead of criticism or pity, almost every notification was filled with encouragement and support. Friends, relatives, and old classmates reached out one after another, many admitting they'd always suspected something wasn't right about Sophie but had never had proof. Watching the videos connected years of behavior they'd brushed aside before, the constant manipulation, the subtle ways she undermined other women, how she flirted with men who were already taken, how she always managed to make herself look like the victim while secretly creating the drama herself. My college roommate Rachel wrote, "I always felt there was something off about Sophie. Remember when she tried convincing me you were talking behind my back? Now I realize she was trying to push us apart." The consequences came quickly for both of them. Ryan lost the backing he'd been counting on after his restaurant investors pulled their promised $175,000 in funding. Sophie's law firm, which proudly promoted traditional family values, fired her after deciding her behavior didn't represent the firm's standard. Ryan's older brother Chris wrote, "You seriously dodged a bullet. Ryan has been selfish ever since we were kids. And honestly, Sophie is exactly the kind of person who belongs with him. Two narcissists deserve each other. Mom says she's never been happier to have someone prove her wrong." 4 months later, a text from Sophie appeared on my phone. "I want a divorce. Ryan is impossible to live with and people treat us like outcasts everywhere we go. Please help me. I'll pay you back." I took a screenshot and shared it online with one simple caption: "Some people never learn. P.S. What money? I never gave you any money." The response was relentless. By then, the wedding videos had spread far beyond our hometown, and millions of people had seen them. Ryan and Sophie had become infamous online as the couple everyone pointed to whenever someone mentioned karma. 14 months after that wedding, they were still legally married. Not because either of them wanted to be, but because neither could afford to hire a divorce attorney. Their reputations had been destroyed, and both of their careers had completely fallen apart. They'd relocated to 4 different states trying to escape what happened, but the videos followed them everywhere. Every time someone searched their names online, the wedding footage appeared almost immediately. Sophie eventually changed her name legally and ended up working as a cashier at a small gas station in Montana. Ryan, whose dream had always been owning a restaurant, was washing dishes at a truck stop diner instead. Every fresh start they tried ended the same way. Sooner or later, someone recognized them from the viral videos. As for me, I spent that year rebuilding my own life instead of someone else's dream. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, launched my own nursing consulting business, and finally discovered who I was without Ryan weighing me down. The $27,500 I'd originally saved to help him open his restaurant became the investment that allowed me to build a successful company dedicated to helping hospitals improve patient care and clinical practices. A month ago, I got engaged to Marcus, the same person who had stood beside me through the darkest chapter of my life and helped me take it back. What started as unwavering friendship slowly became something much deeper as we spent months rebuilding everything that had been torn apart. He showed me what real loyalty looked like and never let me forget that I deserved to be treated with respect. When he got down on one knee, he smiled and admitted, "You know, when I realized I was in love with you, it was while we were planning everything together. Watching you refuse to let anyone destroy your future and seeing you take your life back. That was the most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed." Not long after our engagement, Sophie mailed a congratulatory card to my parents' house. It wasn't exactly heartfelt. Inside, she had written, "Hope this marriage lasts longer than your ability to forgive." I didn't waste much energy thinking about it. I simply mailed back a short note that read, "It will. I finally learned to build my life with people who choose me first. Our wedding is planned for next spring, and this time it's going to be a celebration built on honesty instead of lies." Sophie and Ryan won't be receiving invitations, although I'm sure they'll eventually see the ceremony online. Marcus has already joked that he'll live stream the entire day under the hashtag the real love story, and honestly, I think it's fitting. Nearly everyone who attended that first wedding has already RSVP'd, excited to witness a day filled with genuine happiness instead of betrayal. Since my father passed away last fall, Mrs. Bennett has graciously offered to walk me down the aisle, and I can't imagine anyone I'd rather have beside me for that moment. Even Ryan's old college friends are planning to attend, this time with their wives, saying they want to celebrate the ending I truly deserved. One of the most touching surprises has come from the vendors who worked at the original wedding. The florist, the photographer, the caterer, and several others have volunteered their services at no cost, wanting to help create happy memories instead of remembering the chaos they unknowingly witnessed before. When I met with the cake designer, she smiled and said, "This time we're baking something sweet enough to erase every bitter memory from last year's disaster." I couldn't have said it any better myself.